All right, good afternoon then. I think we are live now on YouTube and all the other platforms. And I'm here to chair this session. And of course, my first words will be to thank our guests today, Alenush Saroyan, she is a professor and director of the McGill International Institute of Education in Canada. And she has been a chair of the Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology at the same university. Her areas of specialization include pedagogical development of academics, academic leadership, quality assurance, and reform of post-secondary systems. She has been a consultant to several organizations, including the World Bank and a number of others, UNESCO and OECD. She has been contributing to higher education reform projects related to assessing and improving teaching quality, and the development and implementation of quality assurance frameworks, processes, and practices. It's my pleasure to have here Alenush Saroyan today, not in person because that was impossible for the reasons we are all aware of, but even so, I thank her for being here virtually, and I'm sure she will be a clear advantage for this debate. Our other guest is Manuel João Costa. Manuel João is a pro-rector for educational innovation and student affairs at University of Minho. University of Minho, they have been interacting with us and discussing with us and collaborating with us in several fronts, and I think both institutions have a lot to gain from this interaction. And I thank Manuel João for his availability today, as always, so far as I remember, and I'm sure it will be very useful for all of us to listen to him. His primary research areas are medical education and biochemistry and molecular biology. He's the founder and coordinator of the Center IDEA Minho, the University of Minho's Center for Innovation and Development of Teaching and Learning. We also have here, and it's extremely important for us to have here representatives of the students. António Alves, and what a representative, because he's chairing the Academic Association of Students of the University of Aveiro. So he represents 15,000 of students here. And before being president, he served in a number of other positions in the association, including vice president. He's also a member of the board of University of Aveiro. And he has a long-standing experience in student affairs and policies, and in culture and sports, and in a number of other different aspects. So I think his presence here will also add value to this debate, and I don't think this would be a complete debate without this vision of the students. So I'll give the floor to Alenush first. Dr. Alenush, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paulo, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I'm going to share my slides with you now. Can you see?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We're living at interesting times, and one of the conversations I heard not too long ago with an author, actually a literary author, was that this coronavirus has a luminal effect. You'll know that the luminal light is the light that's used in criminal scenes to identify latent prints. And the idea that she was promoting was that the virus has shed light to imperfections in everything, including our sector. And very much resonating with that idea is the notion of that was forwarded by our Canadian Association of University Teachers in their recent publication, And what they're basically saying is that the virus has shed light on problems facing post-secondary. And of course, the focus is the Canadian context. And they'd listed a number of things. I picked 4 that were kind of interesting and I thought may resonate with your situation as well in Europe in general and in Portugal in particular. Apparently 30% of students are reconsidering their post-secondary attendance for fall 2020. And in our context, while most of the funding for universities is provided by the provincial governments, but 53% of operating funds is coming from tuition. So with the 11% decline in provincial funding in the last 10 years from 2008 onwards, there is a clear issue of reduced budgets for universities. And of course, the consequence is potential unemployment for university professors and college instructors. So the 2 points I wanted to raise in this short conversation. One is the short-term outlook and one is preparing for an unknown future. Let me start with the short outlook. So just before March, we had vibrant campuses. Everybody was normal, and then suddenly COVID hit. It hit us here in Quebec mid-March, and campuses became really desolate places, no classes, everything shut down basically, and eventually within 2-3 weeks, most instruction became remote. And this is likely to happen as we go forward. So the short-term outlook, just compiling from different sources and looking at my own institution, here are some of the points that I think we have to deal with across borders, basically. Potential drop in enrollments, and this will have consequences for private institutions in particular. Diminished resources, funding, revenue, internal reallocation of resources to cover for some of the unforeseen expenses that are arising. The notion of flexible working arrangements, this has proven in some contexts very productive and may continue as we go forward. Changes in policies. For instance, in our case, all hiring has stopped now. Merit and tenure and promotion has been, people who are applicants are given extra time to put in their files. So there are these kinds of policy changes. There are issues of equity and access, and this has a lot to do with remote learning and what that means to individuals who may not have access to technology, bandwidth, data, whatever that the technology requires. And then mental health concerns, which is prevalent amongst students as well as faculty. Lots of stress, lots of issues concerning that. And what we're going to see is expanded remote learning on traditional face-to-face campuses, changes in physical setups in classrooms, dorms, common spaces, new arrangements, maybe innovative arrangements for experiential component of learning, and then of course disrupted research, partnerships, and international collaboration. So the challenges really, as I see it, are, I'm sure there are more challenges than these 3 that I've kind of listed, but I'm gonna categorize them in 3. One has to do with quality and integrity of academic programs, delivery, and student engagement. One is the ability of individuals and institutions to be resilient and responsive to this particular situation and to other situations that are going to arise whether because of a second wave, whether because of another pandemic, whether because of consequences of this particular pandemic. And then the tangential consequences, which have to do with issues of equity and access and resources that I discussed. But let me just focus here now on the quality aspect, as this is my area of expertise. So I kind of thought about it in four dimensions. One is the quality, which has to do with design of instruction and instructional environments, the delivery of it, and the assessment component. The second is integrity, so maintaining program content and standards and requirements, especially programs that are accredited or by accrediting bodies or professional bodies. And then integrity of participation in the remote context, where students can opt basically to be a picture on a screen and not allow that connection that one makes usually in the face-to-face teaching. The third is student engagement. So how do we harness technologies to ensure that students come to a class, whether it's virtual or limited face-to-face ready? How do we ensure interactions that invoke deep learning and allow students to apply higher order thinking skills? And then technologies that support the remote component of learning that we probably all have to do to some extent. So whether there is robust infrastructure, whether there is access, and most importantly, effective use. Now, the first three, in my view, really are things that one should consider regardless of the face-to-face or the online component. These are things that we, if we do it right and go about our way of engaging students who invest their time and resources in a minimum of 4 years of education, we really owe it to them to ensure that all courses, all programs have proper design based on principles, that the teaching corresponds with learning in mind, and as does the assessment. And so if we were to invest in this kind of activity, whether it's going to be for face-to-face or for remote, it's not going to be lost within the investments that a post-secondary institution does. And in that regard, I wanted to kind of bring two psychological theories here in our discussion. Those of you familiar with psychology will have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Basically, this theory says that the base needs have to be fulfilled in order for the subsequent needs to be fulfilled. So psychological needs, which Maslow would describe, for instance, shelter, food, and well-being as psychological need. If that's not there, nobody's going to care about safety. If safety isn't there, nobody's going to care about belonging to a community or respect or self-actualization, which is where post-secondary educators come in. And in that regard, I wanted to also bring into the picture Bloom's taxonomy, which is something that has been in the educational and psychological literature for more than 70 years, and it still works because what it says is that learning is not just about remembering and understanding, but learning is really about these four more complex types of cognitive skills: applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So the point I'm trying to make here is that if whatever we do, we have to make sure that our environment, that first of all, the basic needs are covered, that for instance, our students are not suffering because of lack of means and resources, that they have a shelter, that they have food, and they're in a safe environment, and we can create those safe environments if we're going to go face to face, and then build the community and self-esteem, and then think about ways that we can help them realize their potential by creating courses and programs that are based on mostly higher order thinking skills. So I just came across this article in one of our publications that teaching and learning centers are the academic heroes of COVID-19. And this is certainly true in our case. And I thought I would bring our McGill example here just to my way of affirming this particular writing. So you may know that McGill is one of the oldest universities in Canada, 200 years history, traditional, with very, very little distance learning or online learning at all. We are funded by our provincial government. It's a research intensive university. We have more than 40,000 students, 11% are doctoral level, and about 32% are international students. We have 1,700 tenured and tenure stream faculty, and in a given term, we teach about 2,200 courses. So an institution like this reverted to 100% online in 3 weeks during the winter of our 2020 term. And we did this all on the basis of the strength of our teaching and learning services. I won't get into the details of what they've done. All the information is available from their website, which is listed. This is one area there, but if you just go to the TLS, mcgill.ca/TLS, you'll see the amount of resources that they've compiled. I wanted to just say one of the first things they did was put together all the teaching and learning technologies that are available to support, support 4 areas. Preparing content, that's creating, sharing, curating course materials, technologies that support course management, organizing and managing classes, technologies that support interaction, that is enhanced engagement and collaboration, and technologies that support assessment, so assessing learning, receiving and providing feedback. If you click on that link, which I won't do because it takes me somewhere else and you won't be able to see it, it will give you the whole compilation of all the technologies available, some of which are supported by McGill and some are not. But that gave our faculty the first set of tools to begin thinking of converting to remote learning. So questions to consider for planning for the short term. And when I say short term, I really mean the forthcoming academic year for us is fall, starting September 2020, going on to 21. Is there going to be a change in the business model, in budgets, whether it's provided by the government or by tuition or other sources? Whether there's going to be reductions in subsidies, donations, philanthropic donations, etc. What are the delivery options? Is it face-to-face? I just heard last night that Harvard and what was the other? There was another university, Princeton. They've decided on reduced numbers. So half the students would be on campus, the rest is going to be remote. Whether it's going to be all remote, whether it's going to be blended as the UK institutions are suggesting at this time. Whether there is support and expertise within teaching and learning centers, are they equipped? Do they have the expertise and the resources to help faculty? And this could be you localize teaching and learning centers within institutions, or it could be a cluster supporting a cluster of universities, for instance, if it's a regional setup. The strengths and weaknesses of available resources, so doing a real good analysis of what supports are available. The continuation of research, how might that be possible with, especially if the budgets are subsidized by tuition. Support for mental health, a huge issue. Is it available to students and faculty? And what are some new opportunities that the situation has afforded? For instance, the possibility of attracting new types of students, whether they're professionals, whether they're people in remote areas who were not able to attend physically and be on campus, and now with a remote situation, they might be able to access it. And maybe new opportunities in work arrangements. So overall, I would like to end by saying this is probably a wake-up call for us to be ready and resilient, to have in place our network of internal and external resources and expertise. And by networks, I just don't mean the physical networks, but also the human networks that are sister institutions, whether they're local, within Portugal, within Europe, or beyond, to make sure that we learn from the work that has been done and is continuing to be done in sister institutions and share expertise with them. An awakening about the role of universities in helping solve local, national, and international problems. And you will note that universities have stepped up in a lot of the research concerning the pandemic, whether it is medical, whether it's social, whether it's psychological. But most importantly, I think it has given us a pause to think about our role in providing the right context for individuals to develop into decent human beings. This is, after all, the highest aspiration that we may have. And it's not just by knowing a lot, it's to what use do we put the knowledge we have gained, and how do we use that to enhance our lives as well as the lives of other human beings. I wanted to end with a very short, if you will allow me, with a very short end of the clip of a conversation with Henry Mintzberg, who's one of our very, he's actually quite world-renowned, and he's a management professor. And he talks about his take of what are the lessons to be learned. And let me just quickly go to this video.
Mintzberg's.
Okay, so I have
how
to
co-opt that. And so
I'm gonna have to unshare this one and share the video. Okay.
democracy. And it's not coincidental that the two so-called democratic countries that are doing the worst are US and Britain. They are both.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted actually to start here.
Okay, so one last question. This one has come in from JJ. The question is, beyond women leaders.
No, not
why
this. Sorry.
And that sometimes a new broom sweeps clean. You know, you need fresh thinking. Sure.
Mm-hmm. So we're
Here.
almost out of time. Let me just throw one final question at you, Henry. And that is, what do you think is the most important lesson that our societies and communities will learn from this pandemic experience? And is this the wake-up call we have all been waiting for to rebalance our societies?
I hope so. And I think the second part answers the first part, because what I'm hoping for is balance. And balance doesn't mean sort of perfect balance. Balance means a dynamic balance across basically across our, each of us, we have to balance ourselves, and each of us has our private interests, our consumer interests, our privacy interests, our free interests, freedom, and so on. And we're not going to give that up. We don't want to give that up. Each of us has our collective interests. We want to live in societies that are democratic. We want to live in societies where the police don't beat us up, and so on and so forth. And each of us wants to live in communal societies. Each of us wants to live in communities where we feel we belong. So we need to balance that in ourselves, so that we can balance it in our organizations, so that we can balance it in our countries, so that we can balance it in the world. And that's kind of the message.
Okay, so basically, I'll end there and look forward to hearing my colleagues to see what they would have to say and continue with the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saroy and dear Alenush. So I would keep this going, and we'll give the floor to Dr. Manuel João Costa. Manuel João, are you ready?
Thank you, Paulo. I'm ready
Right.
as I can. So if you don't mind, I'll also share my screen while I thank Paulo and Sandra and the University of Aveiro for all the wonderful collaborations that we are developing. Together we are stronger, and together we are becoming an interinstitutional community, which I think is key for these times and for the forthcoming times. So is my screen on for everybody?
It certainly is for me.
Okay, so I will start by making one or two strong points. The first has to do with this title, The Post-Confinement of Teaching and Learning. I don't think I'm going to talk about the post-confinement after I thought about the talk. I'm thinking I'm going to talk about teaching and learning, actually. And the post-confinement will be part of the ingredients that will come up. And I would like vividly to talk to colleagues and to talk in the mood of reflection that we can do together. So I hope that whatever we will be sharing in the next few minutes, we will be able to actually think a little differently at the end, maybe. And I'm always keen to get this quote by Claude Bernard, one of the these famous people who was the basis of the evidence hypothesis generating theories that we use in the scientific community, which is that it is all what we know already that often prevent us from learning. And I'm going to pick this up as a way of stimulating a reflection, because I really think about what we had before the post-COVID, before the COVID, and what we're having now, and maybe then talk about this this post-confinement opportunity. So let me make my point first. I strongly believe that, as Alenush was saying, that we belong to a community, and of course screens are not our community. People are our community. Rooms are our community. So whatever I'm going to say, if it sounds like I'm defending some sort of a change to whatever alternative system, that's not true. I'm just going to maybe push it a little bit, so in order to help us maybe reflect and get us out of a bit of a comfort zone. So teaching and learning. So we all very concerned students, faculty members, people that are in the boards of institutions about what we're losing when we stop teaching and lecturing face-to-face. And I'm sure we are losing a lot. We are losing a lot of these secret ingredients. And these secret ingredients often relate with interactions, with people interacting with people. So if we want to talk about the teaching and learning at the post-confinement, and we want to be ready to keep on teaching, I think the best thing that we can do is reflect on how to bring up these secret ingredients to whatever scenario that we're going to have. So for example, let's assume that we're going to have this second wave, and I hope this is not true, and we will be again forced to not stay in campus for a long while. We will have to learn how to bring these secret ingredients to this online sort of forms of learning and teaching. But when we think of that, and I would say because of our tradition, we always think it's going to get worse. We always think we're going to do some impossible things. And sometimes I get the feeling that we forget that not all that we do presentially is really what we should be doing presentially. So that the problems that we have in teaching and learning at the online environment are really so different from the problems that we have when we are teaching presentially. For example, interaction. Okay, for example, interaction. Do we really interact with our students just because we are in the same room? Or let's put it in another way. Let's think about 10, 14-year-olds playing games in their PlayStations 4 or 5 or 6, I don't know which one they have now. And they interact a lot when they speak while they're playing, and they are not in the same room. So is there something that we can actually learn from the other phenomenon, which is that they are really using this media already to do a better interaction, that we are able to do it? That led me to the question that if the difficulties that we are having when we are reflecting about this post-confinement teaching really have to do with a very clear thing, which is the student experiences. Maybe you know this project called the Vision of Students Today. It was developed in 2013, where no such possibility of a COVID or of a quick or slow move to online learning that like we had now was ever in the agenda. And this was led by an ethnography, sorry for this complex word, ethnography teacher that challenged his students, his class of students, to do a self-study about what they saw themselves and as students and the issues they had, and whatever really was the things that they had on their minds that the universities, his university at the time, would have to think about. And the video that came up in 2013 was really a very interesting video developed by students again. And the video summarizes strong messages like the one I'm showing you. They did not create these problems. Okay, the COVID was not created by the students, but at the time, it was the fact that 80% of their teachers, and they self-surveyed, knew their names, for example, and again, at the time, that even though they might complete on average nearly half of the readings that they are assigned to, maybe not a lot of them are relevant to life. Okay, so this actually is not really a big change in the post-confinement era. I think it's not because we are changing places that this is going to get worse, but we have to keep in mind that if we are going to teach differently, we still have to solve the same issues. We still have to think about assignments. We have to think about assessments. We have to think about tasks that are really meaningful for the students and meaningful to what they have to learn. And we have this issue that the online is the difficulty now. I think maybe there's a possibility that the online actually may be actually helping in some other way, in some or another way. Why? Well, we are mostly now at this moment here in Portugal, we are in the time of exams, so we're not teaching anymore, but we were teaching with screens. And one thing that we have with screens is the possibility to asynchronously interact more with students. We have more opportunities to put students working with students, students helping students, developing small groups, developing either project-based or whatever processes that actually help them feel that they are part of a community. And it's true that we can be more present. So I think for the post-confinement teaching and learning, one of the questions that I often see and hear people talking about, which is how much hours should I put online, or what's the percentage of my time that I have to devote to put online? I think maybe we have to reflect together if that's really the sort of questions that we should be asking. I think we have to think about not about maybe the how much or many, but the how we are doing this process that we are able to deal and address the issues that I was presenting before, which were already there before the COVID situation. And the fact is that technology in this sense can be of great help because of the potential to do something very important for education, which is communication. And communication is just as important today, I would say, as flexibility. Now, Alanush was also talking about in one of her slides about different audiences. Now, the issue that technology, is it like the solution to everybody, to every problem in education, has been around. And we now talk a lot about digital education. So I'm wondering, is it true that we were not already having digital education? Is it true that students were not using PDFs and films and we're communicating with each other? And maybe what was happening was that we were not doing ourselves that much of digital involvement of the students. So is it not the case that we can use this digital media like the students are also probably using amongst themselves? So one of the issues that I often see, and I was not teaching this semester, so I was not living it, is the issue of the video classes in which the student faces were off. Well, okay, can we actually be sure that some of them or many of them were not interacting in another social media or other resource, and they were not using this digital medium themselves to actually learn from each other? Okay, of course we would like to have that happening to us, but again, it's not the point that in this post-COVID digital sort of era that we cannot use strategies that students actually are using themselves. Maybe we can appropriate more of those strategies. Maybe we can design our learning scenarios, our learning experiences, our courses in different ways that the digital is part of the process, not the how much, not the changing the amount of time, but actually changing the process of how we're doing things. Which leads me to reconnecting, reconfiguring, and transforming what we're doing. So this is a picture from the University of Minho. This is from 2019. It's an introduction to research methodologies class in the school of by a course in the psychology degree. It's in one of our auditoriums. As you will see, the students are not sitting through; they are communicating, they are interacting. The auditory was there, the presential was there, but the teachers themselves, that particular teacher, had found her way to actually make these interactions happening. And I think this is really an interesting thing to think about, which is the power of the teacher to actually design the experience so that the communication happens. So that, as you can see, I'm sure not of them are all in the same place. There's some flexibility. Some might be more advanced in the task, some might be slower in the task, but they're all working and they are committed and they are engaged. So I would say that if you want to think about this post-confinement teaching and learning, it's very, very important that we use the digital processes, all these platforms that we have at our disposal to actually make communication happen. Of course, if we were doing this in the same building, this is an active learning room from when I think it's actually from the United States, not from Canada. And so the universities were designing spaces for presential classes. So meaning that it was also pre-COVID that there was an importance to actually reflect on the process of what we're doing things and to enhance these key secret ingredients. These students, when they sit in the same table, they spend time working, but they spend the time talking about their pets, they spend time talking about their favorite sports, and that's perhaps what we're not thinking and we're not getting in our current way of teaching, when we think that teaching is often moving online and calculating amounts of the time that we're going to be online. And of course, how far can a teacher go? How far can an individual faculty member go? Of course, it can go further if the balance between teaching and learning and research is actually now made more the balance is more even, let's put it this way. As we know, promotion criteria, everything that has to do with academic life and academic process has also much to do in a research university about celebrating, rewarding, valuing, and funding research. Well, I think institutions now have a very clear opportunity to actually giving this sign that what we're going to be valuing is those that are doing this new ways of teaching in a way that are effective, engaging, and are leading to learning. Because if there's one thing that we learn from this, if there's one thing we learn from this process, is that we have a lot of faculty members who are very generous about their time. I've seen in my university and elsewhere lots of people who are really concerned about their teaching, about their students, who really made a big effort to actually do it better. So there's people there that are doing excellent work, and they are able to give their time, they're able to give their energy. What I think is that we can count on this faculty. The strategy to go forward is actually to think about how we gonna make these faculty communities, and that these communities can sustain their effort, sustain their motivation, and create better experiences for their students. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuel João, for your presentation. And now I would just give the floor to Antonio Alves. Antonio, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
We'll take questions at the end, so let's get started with presentations for now, and then we'll return to the audience for questioning. All right?
Well, first of all, I would like to warn you that my English is a little bit rusty. I will try my best, but if I'm not make you understand what I'm saying, please say something and I will try again. I'd like to take the opportunity to be here discussing this matter and giving my vision. That's kind of the University of Aveiro students' vision. I believe it's very important to have students' voice in every teaching and learning discussion, because I think students are the main interested part in these matters. We don't know a lot about teaching. We never experienced it. We are not experts in teaching, but I believe that we are in some ways experts in learning, and we can feel and give very important feedback and even be part of the change that and the evolution that we seek on education. I would like to do a reflection about the opportunity that confinement has brought us. All the teaching and learning processes and the past few months have changed a lot. We had to adapt really quick at these new processes, this new way to teach, this new way to learn at distance with no face-to-face interactions. And but I believe that this fact made us made a really good opportunity to rethink about everything. We have some examples that could be very important to reflect about it. First of all, digitalization of administrative processes. We believe that even the interaction with the student teacher and with all the services of our universities, we think that sometimes those processes, like having some questions to our teachers, some doubts that we'd like to clear. We have our relationship student-teacher were not we were not used to have asynchronous moments with of the relationship between students and teachers. And sometimes we think that our relationship was all about the classroom. You know, we have our class time, our hour of the relationship in a classroom, and beyond that, we don't have. We feel like sometimes we don't have that kind of relationship. And the confinement have brought us the opportunity to promote some asynchronous moments between teacher and students in a relationship that we think that are very helpful in our relations, and sometimes are more informal, that for the environment that we feel more comfortable in students teacher relation. Beyond that, I believe that the confinement has some other opportunities to us, like sometimes in some cases our teachers gave us the opportunity to create some digital contact, like some teachers gave us the opportunity to record some classes, and that fact we enjoyed a lot to have that opportunity, because that fact gave us a chance to repeat our classes every time we wanted, when we have some questions about it, and sometimes when the matters that we discussed on classes weren't all clear in our minds. We had the chance to repeat them at home at our study times every time we feel like we need it. And this opportunity to create some digital contact, like recording some classes, I believe that it's very important for us in some diversification way of relations between students and teachers. Other than that, I believe that all of us felt like our evaluation processes were very used to face-to-face interactions, and we felt like to give more in distance evaluations processes, and I believe that we all made a really good effort, a really good effort on diversification of evaluation processes. We believe that instead of having 1 or 2 moments of evaluations, like in an exam or a presentation, we believe that sometimes add some real pressure to our shoulders, and we feel like these moments are very decisive to our evaluation. We believe that a semester of work shouldn't be decided at one moment, and sometimes in 1.5 hours of an exam. And we believe that this kind of diversification of evaluation processes are very important. We should bet in a continuous and adjustable evaluation path that values evolution of our students and their learning, instead of them response to sometimes pressure and short. So I believe that this confinement gave us the opportunity to reflect even more about the evaluation processes, and we felt like our teachers made a really good effort in trying to diversify their moments of evaluation, and that was something we enjoyed. But about the post-confinement, we don't have a very clear idea of what this is. We don't believe that we will experience the universities like we used to. I don't know if we will return to normal interactions and to what we were used to at our universities. I believe that we will find a new normal, but we students have some fear on this uncertainty, and I believe it's general here in Portugal, in all of universities. We feel that we adapted pretty well to distance teaching, but we didn't adapt that well at distance evaluation methods. And we are this uncertainty of what we will meet next in a post-confinement time. We don't. We feel like this uncertainty are creating some pressure on us because we don't know what we expect, and we all look for gradual return to universities with face-to-face interactions, but we believe that if we maintain this distance learning, I believe that we will feel like our interactions, where our empathy and proximity to teachers, like a teacher-student's relationship, we felt like we lost it. And it's so much better when we have this kind of empathy and proximity to our teachers, and to have the opportunity to have face-to-face interactions with our friends, with our colleagues, and even with our teachers, that we feel like we were robbed of that in a distance learning. And I believe that we will live some challenges in the next year, like the integration of new students. For now, all the students that are in our universities, we all know what is the normal of our universities. We all know the present students what was University of Aveiro. But next year, the integration will be a challenge, because we fear that the new students, the new coming students, will not know on the first hand what our universities are and the way they goes, and to know the spaces, to know the teachers, to know the colleagues, to know the culture, to know everything around our universities. And I believe that that fact will be a challenge to give the new coming students the opportunity to really be part of our universities, and to really have the opportunity to leave the university as a whole and not behind a computer. Other than that, I believe that one last challenge that I would like to emphasize is digital transformation. We all, and we students all, have the vision that face-to-face relations are, and interactions in the academic term is preferred to distance interactions. But we would like to take the opportunity that this confinement brought us to create spaces for learning and spaces for discussion and interaction. Not only physical spaces that our universities more or less already have, but even virtual and digital spaces for that, for interactions, for learning, and for discussions that we believe that the formation of our students, it's not confined only on classrooms, and we believe that the learning processes of our students must be much more than student relation. That in a time that face-to-face interactions will be constrained, we believe that, creating that spaces of interaction, of learning, of discussion, informal discussion, creating that spaces virtually, digitally, will be essential for respond to the post-confinement and about teaching and learning to. I believe that these spaces, virtual spaces, will be the answer for some challenges that post-confinement will bring us. Will bring to. We have responded distant teaching. We all know about face-to-face teaching. But all the other experiences of the relation between universities and students, we feel like we lost some, and creating that spaces virtually will be maybe an answer to all these challenges, and I believe that will give some of the experience that we lost when we were confined at our homes. I will once more. I would like to thank the opportunity to be here and to give some aspects of my vision to the future and the challenges that we will face in some months, even when we think about the next year and all the really difficult challenges that we believe that we will across in a brief time.
Thank you, Antonio, and thank you, Alenush and Manuel João. So we can now start the really interesting part, and that is taking questions and opening up the discussion. We have been receiving some questioning from the social platforms where these videos have been playing, so I will draw on some of those to start. And one of the first questions was about the sense of community that students used to have with each other. And this sense of community, if I understand the question correctly, is of course somewhat disaggregated because of all these remote learning experiences. So how do you three view this matter? Has this effect been serious? Do you think there is a way around it? Is remote learning or distance learning a problem as far as the spirit and the institutional sense of community concerned? So which of you wants to start? Alenush, you are muted, I guess. Okay.
Yes, thank you both Manuel João and Antonio for the presentations. I think you touched upon some very important issues, and I had made some notes, but one of the notes actually addresses this question, so I'm gonna use that as my response. The sense of community is really one of the most important elements of a basis of creating meaningful learning. And if you remember the Maslow's hierarchy, community is one of the, like halfway in between the basic needs and the fulfillment of aspirations. And so how do we build that in the absence of opportunities to have physical interactions? And this is particularly true for the first year students, as Antonio mentioned, because they have no references to placed themselves in, they haven't formed the relationships, they haven't met the professors. Assuming that we are stuck with this remote situation, I think one of the interesting models that is available in the literature is a framework that Garrison proposes in creating learning environments. And in a very succinct way, it promotes three concepts. The concept of teaching, so the teaching presence, the cognitive presence, and the social presence. So it's not just about disseminating information, if you consider that teaching. It's not about creating meaningful learning opportunities, but it's also creating the social context where students within themselves, students with faculty, small groups, students with other students in other institutions, all these opportunities are created where the social component is nurtured as much as the cognitive and teaching presences are nurtured. So I think that's an important, like a framework to keep in mind if you're going forward in thinking about building remote environments, that the notion of the social presence through asynchronous opportunities is really accentuated in the design of the learning.
So adding to what Alanush just said, what I believe is that we were not ready, but now we can get ready. And what do I mean by that? Now, students had learned in at least 17 years before how to develop their communities in a certain process that actually some of them were better than that than others. Some of them were better than that in making, quick friends and, feeling integrated and so on and so forth. And the basic scenario from the universities was that we were pretty much counting on that when they are entering the university to develop this process among themselves. And traditionally in Portugal, we have not been overly concerned with stimulating that process and creating conditions that process can happen quicker. So I do think we can actually do some work to create processes that help students that are coming in to actually meet their peers in a quicker way, probably meet their peers that are here in their second year or third year, because it's important. It's the guides that will make them pave their way smoothly into college, into the university. And I think we can prepare ourselves to have some programs to actually structure a bit of that start of interactions. And I think this will be very important for next year. So we are thinking about that at the University of Minho at this moment. We are developing a program in which we are talking to, at this moment, 400 students to actually help us in that process. We're going to hopefully train them. It will be a learning experience for everybody. Hopefully train them a little bit, and hopefully support these students that are already here, that when we have our new students, we can actually have a process to accelerate their integration in it. And we have to get ready to make it happen, regardless of it is a bit presential, totally presential, or totally online, because it can happen. So we do have to prepare our welcoming programs in ways that can actually work and help a little more at distance. And I'm sure it will not be the same thing as we were doing it before. But again, I'm pretty much believe that nothing will be the same as before from now on. Well, at least for a couple of months or years. I don't know.
Thank you, Manuel João. Tony Walsh, have you anything to add here?
I believe that the sense of community is very important to a student experience. The challenge in a post-confinement scenario is that we can give students the feeling that everything is okay. I believe in our universities. I believe that in most of the academic experience of our students, we believe that not only the universities and not only the classes will be very important in this sense of the community. All the other experience that students have, like extracurricular activities, sports, culture, will be an important part of this strategy to build up the sense of community of our universities. And I believe, and it's like a challenge that I will bring up to this table, is to involve the student structures, university student structures like academic associations, and even the smaller ones, the courses student structures, to be part of the work of building and try to construct the sense of community in our small groups, in our small communities inside of a university. I believe that the student structures will be very important to the university strategy at this matter.
Thank you. So one key point about the experience in a higher education institution is to my mind that it promotes a citizenship experience as much as a learning experience. And I wonder if we were doomed to continue along these lines and separate ourselves from each other physically, that despite all the online interaction that is possible, a social dimension would be lacking, and that would be probably a handicap that would be very, very difficult to overcome. I wonder if our three speakers have or share this view or think differently, that this is something that can be overcome, and and if so, what our steps should be towards that goal. Does anyone want to consider these?
I can try. So I think that's a very crucial question, but I do think the concept of citizenship is probably not the same in everybody's mind, and it probably varies as time evolves. And I'm not sure that it will be the same after this COVID. So what I do think it's very important is that we actually clarify ourselves about what we mean by separating the classrooms and the teaching from citizenship. I think that maybe we have the first sin of the whole process. If we now within our minds and within our structures, we say, teaching students in class is teaching students, and then we have to go outside to deal with citizenship and social interactions and all that stuff. So I think we might not be starting in the same process. So maybe the whole process of making teaching more meaningful, making learning more meaningful, also has to do with actually thinking about bringing citizenship to teaching and learning. The main question that you are having, which I believe relates with the difficulties that are evident, we don't know how to deal with this at distance. We don't. We need to start serious conversations about this. We need to understand what it means for the students actually to become citizens within higher education better than we do. I'm sure that as we know, what we offer them is only part of what they do to become citizens in the university. And perhaps if we understand better what it is that they are doing in those processes, and we can make a better work at bringing the whole system together. And I think well, if it has to be at distance, I think it's our mission and we'll have to do it. Even we just have to believe that we're not going to get to the same end. We're going to get to a different end, but also dealing with citizenship. That would be my take on you.
Thank you, Manuel. Alenush raised her hand virtually, I suppose.
Yes.
So it's...
Yes, we all get very expert in Zoom.
Yeah.
I do it so often. You're asking an interesting question, and it prompted me to think that maybe there is an opportunity to intentionally foster good citizenship, because I think we are assuming that by having students come to campus, the good citizenship is just developing on its own. And it's sort of like saying, I teach so learning happens. Well, it doesn't happen until the teaching intentionally looks for fostering certain kinds of learning. It's the same for citizenship. Just because they're on campus doesn't mean they're going to evolve into good citizens. So here's an opportunity to actually build into the environments that we're creating to intentionally foster that good citizenship. What do we mean? What are the attributes? How are those attributes integrated in the design of the courses that we have? How are they fostered in terms of the delivery and teaching approaches? How are they assessed? And I was impressed with Manuel Zhao's project of creating this opportunity. And it was sort of something that I hadn't operationalized in my mind, but I was thinking the buddy system was probably, a buddy mentoring system was probably a good way of bringing on new students, and also some of the other students who had not integrated. We're assuming that students, I mean, I'm talking again now from the Canadian perspective, where kids come to university from classes of 20 and are in classes, large lecture halls of 1,000 people. They don't feel comfortable. Many don't like this notion of not knowing in person their professors, or the professors not knowing their names. So here's an opportunity where even in huge lecture versions, small groups could be created when the students can have personal interactions with the profs or their student mentors. And so I think there are some very interesting models that could be developed using this tool that is available to us and is being used, and we have to use it. We're forced to use it. So we might as well use it to its fullest potential.
Thank you. Thank you, Alenush. I have another hand raised by José Oliveira. This Zoom link was broadcasted in the social networks after your 3 talks. So now the people are coming in with some questions. I guess José Oliveira is one of them. José, are you listening? Do you want
Yes,
to?
I am.
Okay.
I would like to start by asking you to forgive my my informal look, but since we've been confined, this informal look has become an issue also. And if you don't...
I can't see you. So I don't know how informal you are looking, because I can't see you.
Sorry, my camera is on, so if you can see me, Paulo,
no problem.
it's probably...
Okay, now I can see you. Well,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I am wearing a white T-shirt over...
Yeah, I can see that.
Over... Okay.
You look quite relaxed.
I intended to be quite relaxed because I, at some point, had decided not to intervene in this forum in such a how shall I put it, in such a spontaneous way. You may have noticed that in the chat room I have been posing and questioning all and all over again some of the interactions I've been seeing, which I really think are really interesting, and I believe that some of my questions are also relevant to this discussion. My point is, we were struck by a sort of how shall I put it, a tornado, right? Which was this pandemic, and this sent us overboard to a new way of interacting with students. I would like to say, first of all, that in my institution, which is one of the departments of the University of Aveiro, this was not such a different approach to what we have been doing for 20 years. And sometimes I feel a bit discomfortable with the fact that people believe that that this is all new to everyone. This is not all new to everyone. There are people that have been doing great jobs in interacting with students, in keeping close relationship with students, in interacting with them online, in interacting with them on these situations. Of course, having classes online, trying to supervise project work online is actually an extremely difficult job. I myself have felt this over this past semester. I'm an electronics professor.
But what was your question really? Because I kind of lost myself.
My question really was, so sorry for trying to introduce my environment, João Paulo, but that's the way it is. My really question is, how do you feel that the social interaction between students is lost in this new environment? And how,
right, it's very easy for me to handle questions today, because all I have to do is to forward them to our experts and they will try to answer them. So
so that's the first question.
Keep asking difficult questions.
I have many more. Okay, if
okay,
you want to get back to me,
one at a time, because
one at a time. So the first one is the social interaction between students is, as far as I'm concerned, as much important as their learning experience.
That's for sure.
And that has somehow been lost in this post-pandemic situation.
Of course. So let's try to address that question now. In fact, I think we have discussed that just moments ago. There is another question coming in about assessment, and also José also mentioned assessment. In fact, there was one very interesting point about assessment, and that was pertaining to anxiety. We used to think that students were anxious about assessment, and in this new situation that was created for us, I think that both teachers and students were made anxious about assessment for different reasons, I believe. But in any case, they were both anxious about this. So maybe assessment is one of the key issues that must be addressed. And towards this issue, I think the attention of students and teachers and responsibles is required. So maybe our panel wants to...
I'll shut my mouth about that, although I have many questions and many opinions on that.
Sure,
as
I
well.
have raised hands now from Alenush.
As you raise the question, I'll just mute myself. Okay.
Okay, Alenush, please.
Yes, thank you, José, for your question and for the assessment question. I'll try to address both. So I think there is a, like that, there is a range of ways that people teach. There's a range of which people put their instruction online and create learning environments. So while some might be very naturally have reverted to remote learning, doing the same things that they did before, for others, it was just putting lectures and making that available to students. So I think that the point is that there is a generalization of the quality of remote learning that may or may not pertain to outliers. Some outliers are doing better, some outliers are doing worse. And so the point, I think, that you are doing it is great. And one of the things that institutions like Avero should benefit from are people like you who have expertise in doing certain things in a positive way, and to use those individuals to propagate the practice to other colleagues. Because resources are limited in all our institutions. The dimensions that has come out of this conversation is leadership. And I don't mean leadership, just the academic leadership, but leadership of individuals who've come forward and offered their expertise in helping other colleagues do things in a better way, more efficient way. And I'm just thinking, for instance, in my own department, a couple people who have been very good with things like capturing Camtasia or some other technologies that have really offered their services, not just to our department, but to our teaching and learning services. So if you think you're doing this well, this translation of the social aspect to learning environments, then you might want to offer your experience and expertise to other colleagues who are not doing it as well. About assessment, I think there was a survey across Canada, and I've heard this secondhand, so I can't give you the source, that of faculty and students, and the most common concern of both faculty and students is the assessment component. For students, it is what is how can they do assessment with multiple projects, as Antonio was mentioning, not just one-time assessment, but multiple ways that would actually be reflective of the knowledge and skills they have gained in the course. And for faculty, it's the notion of plagiarism. So these are two kind of disparate issues, but nonetheless of important concern to both faculty and students. You know, I have a personal view on this, which I'm happy to share with you. And my view is actually, what is assessment for? I mean, is it a summative thing to say who passes and who doesn't? Or is it a formative tool to help learning happen? And I happen to subscribe philosophically to the latter, which is, in my view, assessment's got to be something that guides the learning throughout. It's got to be formative. It's got to be in multiple forms to capture the different aspects of learning. It's not just knowing stuff, but what does that knowledge apply to? How does it contribute to solving problems? How does it relate to realities of real life in authentic contexts? So build it that way. And if one were to think of assessment in that way, I think it would resolve a lot of the issues, because then the notion of plagiarism would not exist. Let students access any resources they want. If you've created an original problem that they need to solve, that's the point, isn't it? That they draw on whatever resources are available to them to solve a given problem. So set it up in a way that would avoid any kind of plagiarism, set it up in a way that would allow for you to provide feedback formatively so that it helps their learning further. And I think that would address also the students' concern and anxiety that it's not a one-time thing. It's not a technology software that's going to lock you into the system, that you're not going to be able to walk around, that's going to tap into your privacy. So I think it would kind of eliminate a lot of the issues that people are worried about with regards to assessment. Over to you, Paulo.
Thank you, Alenush. Antonio Walsh has raised his hand. Antonio?
About the loss on social interactions in students. I believe that we lost a lot. We lost a lot of our experiences in the university, not only on our classrooms with our colleagues, but in all the university environment and ecosystem that all the universities and all the institutions have. Not only when we are learning, but in everything we do in our universities. We lost sports that in some way is one of the main building ups of relationships and interactions with our colleagues. We lost culture with in our universities because we were not there. We were shut down at our rooms, at our houses, and we lost all of it. Next year, I believe that will be worse if the confinement if confinement continue, because the new upcoming students will not know anything about their universities. They will not build up relations with their colleagues because they will not have the whole experience of being part of a university, of being part of a community. And about assessment, assessment is the main concern that students have in this matter. We generally didn't adapt to distance assessment. We have a lot of insecurities on it because we were not used to that. We were used to face-to-face presentations. We were used to face-to-face assessment moments in our exams, and we were not used to that. And neither do teachers were used to that. And we feel like all the students community and all the teachers community have a really big concern about this and a lot of insecurities on this, because the solutions that were found, some of them were not really profoundly explored. And I believe that all the community was concerned about that. We believe that assessment should be a checkpoint to adapt teaching and learning processes, and not to make sure that the students are assessment should be a checkpoint to adapt teaching and learning, and not the main reasons why we were made able or our formation is already done or not, and if we all have all the components and all the knowledge that we should do in our courses. I believe that this checkpoint view should be what every teacher, not in every way of teaching, should be given to this assessment matter.
Thank you, Antonio. Manuel João.
Yeah, very quickly. First of all, I think we have to be clear that what has happened. So of course we lost a lot of social interactions. Of course there was a lot of harm done to our learning and teaching process because the social interaction was damaged. What we really have to think about is to keep that objective on the top of our list, and so that we do not forget we're all preparing for the next term. And in that regard, I think we have to be very aware that we are being pushed in a way to teach the same amount of content, a set amount of courses, and the calendar tends to be a bit shorter. At least in Minho, the year is going to start a little further down, a couple of weeks later than the year before, and that will maybe generate attention in faculty members to actually pack what they were doing in the same things that they were doing in less time. And I really believe that if this is a priority on our list, we have to make time within our courses to stimulate this social interaction, to nurture this interaction, and so that it can actually help the learning process. In terms of assessment, well, I think assessment has been for a long time one of the most neglected aspects in teacher development. And I think this is very, as someone was saying before, and I think it was Alanush, what this pandemic thing shows us is that digital luminal, you were using the term luminescence, something like that. And assessment is clearly one of the things that we probably weren't doing not so good. And what we need is a strong development of faculty members in assessment. And that has to come up either through communities of people who know how to do it, and doing well and start sharing with each other, as well as from centers of teaching and centers of innovation, which in Portugal have not as many resources, have not as many expertise as in elsewhere. And so that's a real problem. And I think one of the things that is very important here is that we do need students to also be aware that they have to be a positive part of the playing game. It's very important that they collaborate in this process, because it's a learning process for everybody. And if they sit and stay for the first, wait until for the first test result to come out, then it will be too late. I think we need to get really involvement of everyone that is interested in assessment, which is everybody, in actually developing assessments for the next year.
Okay, thank you, Manuel João. And before wrapping up and giving Sandra one last chance of saying a few words, I saw a question by Barbara Gabriel that, if I understand correctly, she makes a point about how this situation contributed to some abilities being deepened by students, namely those that are related to resilience, the ability of being creative in the digital world, the ability to adapt to new situations. And she asks if we are really checking these new competencies and then reflecting them in our curricula. Maybe Barbara wants to add something to this if I didn't correctly get her question, but Barbara, are you there?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for the presentations. No, I fully agree with what you mentioned about my question. It's true. Are we able or will be able to monitoring and assessing these new competencies? They already exist, of course, but they were reinforced during this challenge that we are living. Thank you.
The importance was really underlined by all these. So, Alanush.
Yeah, resilience. It's. I mean, resilience is one of them, but creative and critical thinking is another. And I'm sure Sandra has apprised you of the project that the OECD is leading on critical thinking and creative thinking, and especially the assessment of it. So I won't go in that area. I'll stick to resilience for now. What does it mean? I mean, I think the first task has to be for us to define individual resilience and organizational resilience, both of which are important. The resilience of organizations to pivot on a dime, basically, to this particular crisis and maybe future crisis is really important as well. So the way if you refer to the literature, the way it's defined is, for individuals, it's the ability to build connections, to foster wellness, to find purpose in what you're doing, and to embrace positive thoughts. So to kind of be focused on knowing that you can and will find a solution, and use your resources and networks and connections in order to address that. For organizations, maybe it's a little different, and it's their ability to resist adverse situations and recover from disturbances, to adapt to situations and to anticipate, which is where we find ourselves because we don't know what the future holds and we have to anticipate the worst. How are we building this? If we have definitions, we can certainly focus our learning outcomes in our respective courses and programs to make those as intended learning and then build our teaching to support it, and then build projects that will be able to assess the competency. But we need to internally agree to a definition that for our institution means acceptable definition of resilience. And I guess what I just want to say is we need to know where we're going before we can find a way to get there.
Thank you indeed. I see no further hands. Sandra, do you want to wrap up and conclude because we are running out of time?
Yes,
Actually,
we're
my hand
with
is raised, but I will leave it to Sandra to close up.
yeah. So
Okay.
we're a bit late
Sorry.
in our program, so some of the questions were not answered by Jose and by Lucilia, but we can get back to you later. I would just thank you all for the excellent discussions. Thank you especially to Alanush and Manuel João and Antonio, and for our rector for the excellent moderation on this. And as I was saying in the morning, the idea is that we will keep building these communities of practice, both virtually and in presence. So I'm sure we will have plenty of opportunities to continue this discussion. So thank you all for being here, and have a nice academic year next year because it's not far away. So have a pleasant day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.